All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our August virtual Lunch and Learn program for the LGBTQ plus Workplace Alliance. Today's topic is effortless presence, leading with presence in high pressure environments. And we're very excited to bring you today's presentation, and we'll be talking about our guest speaker in just a little bit. My name is Ryan Wilson. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the Director of Corporate Relations for the Greater Houston LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce. And it's my honor to work with all the large employers that are a part of the Chamber's Impact Partner. So this event is specifically for our Impact Partners and exclusive to you all as part of your benefits for being a company that supports our Chamber in an impactful way. We want to acknowledge on the phone call today with me is our Executive Administrator, Maureen Mayori, who is going to be managing the Zoom. So if you have any questions, feel free to message Maureen or myself in the chat. She'll also be dropping some of the questions and links throughout today's presentation. Anytime you have a question, feel free to drop one, but we will also do Q&A at the end with Tim, our special guest. One last note, this is being recorded, and you can check out all of the Chamber's virtual offerings on our YouTube page, which has our past virtual lunch and learns available for you. A little bit about the Chamber, if you're not familiar with us, we are the Greater Houston LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce. We are, according to the Houston Business Journal, the fifth largest Chamber of Commerce in the Greater Houston area. And we say that we stand at the intersection of business and the LGBTQ community. So it's really our focus to help bring the community together around business, economic, and other development opportunities so that we can all thrive in our lives. The Workplace Alliance program, as I mentioned, is specifically for our impact partners. Those are companies with 100 or more employees who have invested in our chamber through their membership. And we want to bring together folks from those companies who are doing good inclusion work, helping make their companies a better place to work. And that could be folks who are ERG members, leaders, inclusion professionals, anyone trying to make their company a better place. We'll do events every month like this one. Today's guest speaker is Tim Kollatschny, who is founder and coach of Coach to Elevate. And we will be hearing more from Tim in just a bit. I do want to thank Coach to Elevate for sponsoring today's event, as well as HP and HEB, who are our Workplace Alliance sponsors for the year, and also ExxonMobil, who has joined us as a sponsor of these virtual Lunch and Learn programs. I want to just give you a few highlights of upcoming chamber events that you may find interesting. We have a full calendar of events, pretty much happening something every week. And then we do our impact partner events at least once a month. The next one will be our LGBTQ Workplace Alliance Mixer. Sorry, the typo there on the header, but our Workplace Alliance Mixer is actually going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be at Puttery. They are offering a free 9-hole game, as well as some snacks and light bites for folks. There'll be a cash bar. This event is complimentary for our impact partners. Each partner will get a certain number of tickets based on your impact partner level. So if you have any questions about how many folks you all can bring, please do reach out to me. And then it will be open to guests who are in the corporate America space. So if you have other folks that might be interested in joining our Workplace Alliance as an impact partner, this would be a great event to invite them to join us. That'll be on September 10th. Additionally, excuse me. So, right spot. On September 30th, we will have our Houston Business Action to End HIV meeting. The next one will be in person. Sometimes we've done virtual or hybrid. This one's going to be in person on September 30th at noon. So if folks are interested, go ahead and sign up on our chamber calendar. The event will also be open to anyone who is interested in learning more about how to be more involved in addressing HIV as a topic, as well as anyone who's a current chapter member or any company that's interested in signing up to be a chapter member. And then save the date for our LGBTQ plus Workplace Alliance Summit. We are bringing this event back. It'll be October 29th, a day-long professional development opportunity for folks that want to learn more and grow as they do inclusion work within their companies, and also as they lead groups like employee resource groups for their companies. And we will be at Amagi Banks Tower in the Galleria again for this event. So we're really excited. Save the date. More details will be coming out in the near future with RSVP link, but go ahead and save the date for that. And then another important date to save is November 20th, which is our holiday food and supply drive combined with our day of service. There'll be three ways that companies can participate. ERG groups can either sponsor the drive outright, they can sign up for a collection box. We'll actually have boxes that you can sign up for and have them on site at your various facilities and collect donations for Tony's Place, our beneficiary this year. And you can also sign up for volunteer shifts. So during the day of the drive and possibly days after, Tony's Place will be offering some volunteer shifts that ERG groups can adopt as a way of filling helping them sort of sort through all the donations that'll be coming, and also filling our day of service goals for this year. All right, so that's enough chamber updates for now. Do check out our calendar of events. The link is in the chat. We do hope to see you at more events. But today, I want to introduce Tim Kollatschny, who is our guest speaker. And Tim spent nearly 30 years at Shell. So I'm going to stop sharing now so that Tim can join me on screen. Tim was leading global business while learning what it really means to lead with presence. As an openly gay executive, he didn't always have a map. He found his way by showing up honestly, especially even when it felt risky. Today, Tim is a coach with his own company, Coach to Elevate, who works with leaders and professionals navigating visibility, influence, and imposter syndrome. His approach is rooted in lived experience, emotional clarity, and the belief that real presence doesn't come from performing, but from being real. We are proud to call Coach to Elevate one of our new chamber members, and we are also really grateful for you sponsoring today's event. So, Tim, I'm going to turn it over to you so you can give us some of your presentation.
All right, great. Thanks, Ryan. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate being a part of this. Also, thank you to everyone for joining us today. Um, I'm going to, first of all, can you see the screen? Can everybody see the presentation? Okay. Um, I'm going to start out being a little vulnerable. I'm going to tell you that at my very core, I just want to be accepted. And when I start to think about, where that leads me, um, I get to an admission. The admission is that going into this and planning for this presentation, my very first instinct was to figure out how to control how you perceive me. The reality is that that's just not possible. I can't control how anyone perceives me, much less how all of you perceive me. It's not, like I said, it's not only exhausting, but it's just impossible. I think that a lot of that came from this instinct that I have to find safety, to scan the room for safety. Thinking back to my career and even before that, as a gay man, I always felt like I had to perform better just to be seen as equal. And even with a strong performance, a lot of times I didn't feel like I belonged. I don't think that's just my story. I think that's a story that a lot of us carry. But let's start with a little grounding in the conversation here. There's a UCLA study done in 2023, and a few findings from that study were that 72% of LGBTQ plus employees have heard slurs or derogatory comments at work during their lifetime. 34% of LGBTQ plus employees have been fired, not hired, or denied a promotion because of who they are. And transgender people and LGBTQ plus people of color experience that in even higher rates. Well, what do we carry to work? from that. According to that same study, 58% report covering. That could be adjusting tone, appearance, or disclosure. 46% are not out to their supervisor, and 21% are not out to any coworkers. And that can often impact why presence feels very hard to access. It's hard to access for anyone, but I think people who experience those types of things, um, it can make it especially hard to try to access presence. So why does it feel hard to access? The first is code switching. That could be constantly adjusting how we show up to stay safe or fit in. Um, and I did that for a really long time, just scanning the room for safety. What I realized is that that was energy that I was taking away from being present and really focused on performance, really focused on just managing that perception of others. There are also a few mirrors at the top. When we don't see people like us in leadership, it subtly tells us that we don't belong, that we have to work twice as hard just to prove our worth. There's also internalized homophobia or shame. There are old messages that we've absorbed about our identity that can linger. Even when we're successful, that inner voice can whisper that we're too much or not enough, and that can make presence feel risky. And lastly, there's the trauma of being seen. Sometimes we've been visible in the past and it didn't feel safe. Maybe we were outed, excluded, tokenized. Those experiences can really make us be hesitant to show up fully again. I now want to ask you guys some questions. And this, what I've tried to do here is make this less of a presentation and more of an engaging, almost really large group coaching session. And the first question that I have for you all, and what I'd like for you to do is drop your answers into chat, is how does the desire to be accepted show up in your work and or leadership? You could just go ahead and drop that into the chat, and I will read off a few of the ones that pop in. Ah, yeah. Striving for perfection. Who else? Delivering direct feedback. Ah, hiding. Always wanting to say yes. Those are really great things. People pleasing. That is something that I do as well. Fear to make mistakes or share the wrong information, sharing too much information about myself, second guessing statements. Yeah, I've said something. How was that received? Overthinking what to do. It takes away from our productivity. That's great, Carolina. Well, perfect. Now I'm wondering, would anybody be willing to share with the group their ideas, their thoughts about this? If you are, just raise your hand in the chat. No one? Okay. Well, let's move on to the next slide. The next one's another question for you. What would change if you stopped trying to be impressive and just let yourself be present? Go ahead and drop your answers into the chat. Yeah, more relaxed, more room in your brain, more natural. Yeah, I think that when I stop trying, when I look at that first instinct that I have less anxiety, absolutely authenticity. When I realize that first instinct of mine, that's the first thing that I have to do is recognize that that's happening. And then I ask myself, why is that happening? Why have I been, why do I need to do that? A lot of times it can be comparing my insides to other people's outsides. How are they showing up? They seem so calm. They seem like everything, it's like, like a duck gliding across water. How do they do that? And why can't I do that? Why is there so much turmoil going on inside me? These are the type of things that we explore a lot in coaching. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. Um, so I was raised on a ranch about halfway between Houston and Austin, and that's where I came of age. Let's just say that it was a lot like Green Acres, and I was a little bit like Ava Gabor. Um, it wasn't a very welcoming place for a gay person to come of age. There was no one there like me. And I saw how others who were perceived as being gay were treated and how I was treated. What that taught me was to scan for safety. I did that for my own protection. And then what it further taught me was that when I scan for safety, how do I need to show up so that I can stay safe? So what performance do I need to do to stay safe? That's something that was integrated into my life very, very early. But I went off to college. I went to the University of Texas, and upon graduating, I started working at Shell in 1989. I remember one of the very first performance reviews that I had. This was probably in year two or year three. I sat down with my manager. He went through everything, the things I need to improve on, the things that I, that I was doing really well. And he kind of ended it with saying, um, yeah, things are going really well for you, Tim. Now, the one thing we have to do is find you a wife. That was like in 1992. That was an indication to me to say, to believe that it's not safe. It's not safe to be who I am. So it furthered that belief that had been instituted in me from growing up younger. So I continued along the way. After a few years, later on in the 1990s, I came out to my manager at the time. Her name was Marilyn, and Marilyn was very instrumental in my life. Um, I told her I'm sharing this with you. She was the very first person I told at Shell. Um, and when I had that conversation with her, she was very accepting. Like I said, she was just amazing in that conversation. But an interesting thing happened a couple of months later. We were having a team meeting. It was getting close to the holiday season. Once she asked the team, would you rather have lunch for just us, or would you rather go out to dinner and bring your spouses or dates? I was the only one who voted for lunch because I wasn't prepared, because I was in fear of coming out to my colleagues on the team. Later that day, she called me into her office and she said, Tim, I couldn't help but notice that you were the only one who voted for lunch. And I'm wondering what's behind that. And I was honest with her. I told her what I was feeling. And she said, well, Tim, it's totally up to you. But I do hope that at some point you feel comfortable being yourself. And that was a message that was well received. I ended up taking my partner at the time to dinner. Let's just say I didn't handle that the best way. I didn't tell anyone that I was gay or that I was bringing my partner to dinner. I just showed up with him. And there was some interesting reactions, all positive, but some interesting reactions from my colleagues. After I came out, I really came out. I didn't hide it. And one of the things in corporations, and this may speak to some of the experiences that a lot of you have, is that every time you go to a new group, you have to come out once again. And that was something that I did, and I got comfortable doing that. But as a result, my career really took off. I did really well. I went on to manage the group that bought and sold all the gasoline, diesel, and jet in the United States, and then ended up as the leader for one of our global chemical businesses. It was at that time when I was a leader of our global business, one of our global business chemical companies, that the vice president of HR came up to me and asked me if I'd be willing to share my story. There was a series that was called Life at Shell, and I stopped to think. My instinct was to say, sure. I mean, what harm is going to come to me? I haven't had any really bad experiences, and my career has really taken off, and I felt like I was in a comfortable place. But that old feeling that I need to protect myself, that I need to scan for safety, that was still there. Um, I said yes. So they did the article. This was an article that was going to be published globally to all 90,000 Shell employees at the time. And this was in 2013, 2014. Um, the article came out, and interesting story. The day that it was coming out, I went down to for lunch in the tunnels when we were located downtown, and I didn't have any cell signal. As soon as I got on the escalators coming back into One Shell Plaza, all of a sudden I got a text from a friend of mine, and she said, "Now that's what I call coming out at Shell." What had happened, and I didn't know this was going to happen, is that the article was actually the featured article at the top of Shell's global internet page. So at that point, I was out to anyone in the company and the title of it was Tim Kollatschny talks about his life as a gay man at Shell. At that point, I was out to everyone in the company. The article, there were comments on the article, and I would say that 95% of them were positive. A few of them weren't. There were a few places that I wasn't very popular. But in that, it taught me a few lessons. One is that by me being vulnerable and telling people who I am, it gave others the permission to do the same thing. And it wasn't just about being gay. It was about being other in other parts of our community. It was about being on the spectrum, having ADHD. A lot of people felt permission to be more fully themselves as well. So that was a great lesson. The biggest lesson I learned, however, was that people are going to feel however they feel. And me trying to manage the perception of others is exhausting and impossible. So all I can do in life is try to show up the best way I can today, try to show up better tomorrow than I do today. And I'm a human being. So when I make a mistake, I'm going to own it and I'm going to try to do better. Those are the only things I do in life. And when I come back to that realization, when I come back to that core belief that I've developed, I'm filled with serenity. The anxiety leaves me. Um, and I get a feeling that I am enough, that I don't have to be more than what I am. From that point forward, I really tried to stop performing and started practicing presence. So let's talk about a little bit about what effortless presence is. What is effortless presence? First of all, presence doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from letting go. It's not about doing more, it's about doing less and trusting in who you are, understanding your values, understanding your why. Why do I show up? What's important to me? And when I'm grounded in that, the rest of it comes very naturally. Um, excuse me, it's not about letting go. Effortless presence, as I define it, it's the ability to be yourself without hustling for legitimacy, um, and that's key, I think, to showing up differently at work. So let's ask a few more questions now. What would it look like for you to lead without needing to prove anything? Go ahead and drop your answers into the chat. Let's think about it. How would that feel? Relief, liberating. Who else? Trust, fearless, confident, freeing again. A breath of fresh air, an exhale. In fact, that was my instinct to do when I read that. Uncertain without some guardrails. Yeah. Maybe even fun. Sure. But I'm comfortable being myself and I'm not performing. I'm fully engaged. I am fully present in what's going on at that time. That's perfect. Thank you. So let me ask you another question now. What's one small way that you could show up more authentically this week? Just one small step. It doesn't have to be earth-shaking. Yeah, self-care, not to overthink. Speak up without apologizing for speaking up. Mention my same-sex relationship in the same manner my heterosexual colleagues share about their significant others. Stop covering. Perfect. Thanks, guys. My next question for you to think about is what ripple could your honesty create for others? Safe space can be validating. Visibility as a role model. Yep. Creating an inclusive environment. Make others comfortable to do the same. Showing them that it's safe there, right? Understanding. Encourage others to unapologetically be themselves. That's such a huge gift. All of those are great gifts to give to others. Leading by example. Great, guys. So let's talk a little bit about how I try to access this effortless presence. It's three steps. The first one is to pause. I've got to notice what is pulling me away from that moment. Um, and when I figure out what it is that's pulling me away, what I want, maybe the fear. And I'll tell you a little bit about fear as well. There is healthy fear and there is unhealthy fear. Healthy fear is that there's a lion walking down the street and I'm not going to go out there and kick it. I'm going to stay as far away from it as I can. Unhealthy fear really comes from two places. It comes from either losing something that I have or not getting something that I want. So a lot of times when I pause and I think about what's pulling me away, a lot of the times what's pulling me away is fear, fear of something happening. And so if I think about it and I try to think, well, is this a healthy fear or is this an unhealthy fear? And if I decide that it's an unhealthy fear, I say, okay, well, what is it that I'm afraid that I'm going to lose or not get that I want? And when I follow that train of thought, it helps really crystallize in my mind why I'm being pulled away from this present moment. The next is presence. I try to return back to my values, my breath, and my truth. You know, if it's a fear of not being enough, it's the realization and the understanding that I am enough. I think about things like, what would I tell a friend who is thinking this? And if I'm willing to tell a friend about this, about what they're going through in a similar situation, then why wouldn't I tell myself that as well? And then the last step is power. I choose how to show up in alignment with my values. It's an intention. I set an intention. How am I going to show up? What do I want to do? And then from there, I just let whatever's going to happen happen. And there's peace in knowing that I've done all that I can in that moment. Effortless presence is really trying less and trusting more. So let's look at our last question for the session and go ahead and drop these into chat. What would it mean for you to lead with effortless presence? Think about it a little bit and drop it into the chat.
Tim, could you show us that slide again with the model?
Yeah, here we go. This is, like I said, effortless presence is trusting more and trying less. So what would it feel like to access that?
Tim, I'll jump in and share while folks are putting in the chat.
Yeah.
I think in the current climate I'm in, having to tiptoe around whether a company is supporting or where they are in their DEI process right now, I have this fear of like misstepping in what I'm going to say around the words DEI or inclusion. So like this kind of helps me think about like how do I still show up in power while trying to navigate understanding that some companies are struggling with diversity right now, right?
Yeah. Well, how do those thoughts that you have about that when you're going into that conversation, how does that affect how you show up?
I think I've been pulling back a little bit, like
Mm.
I'm afraid to like step in it, right?
Yeah.
Instead of sort of still showing up in a sense of like this is important work that we know the chamber continues to do, and regardless of what it's called, this work needs to continue. So it's trying to show up more in power as opposed to like kind of tiptoeing, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah. It feels, if I can mirror back what I heard from you, it sounds a bit like it's pulling you back from your authenticity, from what you really want to do. Yeah.
Now we got some stuff in the chat.
Yeah, I'll go take a look at it. I did want to just mention something about authenticity. Um, Out of all the traits that are out there, one of the most attractive is authenticity. We are naturally, as human beings, drawn to people who are authentic and authentically show up as they are because we believe that we can trust what they say. Um, and it's hard to be authentic when you have this track on repeat running through your head of how do I need to show up? How do I need to show up? How do I need to show up to get what I want or not lose what I have? How do I do that? And instead, if I return back to what my values are and speak from those confidently and authentically, ultimately people are going to feel however they're going to feel. So again, I've got to let go of that uh, need that I have to control how other people are going to perceive me. Let me go through some of the items in the chat really quickly. Um, Easier, natural. I'd feel more confident, empowering. It is empowering, liberating, happier, more fulfilled, freeing, more focused on work. Absolutely. How much energy do we put in to to being performative, to show up in the way that we think we need to show up for others? Yeah, more focused on work, and I think naturally comes from that is being able to accomplish more. That's perfect. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate your participation. Okay, that is what I have for us to talk about today. So what I'll leave you with is that if you would like to explore, how this could fall into part of your leadership. If you'd like to explore what this could mean to you or other things, I'd be glad to connect. I'm pretty easy to find. My name is Tim Kollatschny. My email is tim@coachtoelevate.com, and my website is coachtoelevate.com. And I will tell you, I have a free guide that I've put out there. I'm coming out with a revised version of it, but there's a guide out there right now on effortless presence and gives you a little more background. So feel free to go out on my website and grab that and download that and reach out to me if you have any questions that I might be able to help you with. All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so now's our chance to actually have some Q&A with you, Tim. So if folks want to raise their hand or drop a question in the chat, we can go ahead and open the floor for folks that might want to sort of talk about and unpack what you've just shared with us. I know I gave an example. Oh, there, good. There's one dropped right there from Nathan. You want me to
Yeah,
read it to you?
yeah, absolutely. My observations about how different generations are approaching being out at work, Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, et cetera. Um, do you think times have changed since you came out? Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. You know, just the general statistics that you would find from the public. And I was very involved with HRC earlier in my career. And Ryan, you may have the actual rates, but people's acceptance of LGBTQ plus people and relationships and certain aspects of equality, especially around work, I think has really grown. Ryan, do you have some information on that?
Yeah, I will say though that um, we have seen that there was a steady increase in support for same-sex marriage, and also overwhelming majority of folks supported workplace protections, but those numbers have seen a dip in the
Yeah.
last 3 years. So while we were on an upward trend, we're actually sort of in a somewhat of a dip. Um, and then the other thing that I think might change from company to company is where in the company they are on their inclusion process.
Mm.
I did a presentation last June around the importance of allyship because that company had just started to create a Pride resource group, and they hadn't had one before. So maybe feeling comfortable in that company to be out might be different than one where the company has had a Pride group for 20 years,
Yeah.
right? What does that say? Shell USA has been a leader in having some of those types of groups. So was it different maybe working for a company that had a group like that?
Yeah.
too?
Look, I will tell you that I think certainly the time that I grew up was way different than Gen Z, millennials, Gen X. We didn't have a lot of positive role models of gay people in media and movies. Um, People hid their identity. I remember, the band Culture Club and Boy George. The best that he could do in terms of coming out was by saying that he was bisexual.
Mm,
And I always found that to be really interesting, that was the best he could do. And he's gay. I mean, he couldn't come out though and say that he was gay. He had to say he was bisexual.
mm,
Um, so certainly things have changed. Society has gotten more accepting, and people are coming out a lot younger than they did before. I still think, however, there is inside of us because of messages that we've received and the stats that you just talked about, that there's been this dip. There's this fear that I think is very natural that if I come out and I do this, what risk am I taking? And what are the consequences going to be? And I think it's important to think about that. I do think, however, it's really important to separate the emotion and the fear from it from what might actually happen and ask myself the question, what is that fear costing me?
Yeah. And then you talk about covering, which covering can happen in any type of form of identity. I
Yeah.
mean, when I was younger, it wasn't cool to be a geek. Marvel films weren't on every big
Uh,
screen. And I remember being bullied for being the geek that loves sci-fi and whatever. And now I can wear those t-shirts proudly. But that was something about myself that I used to kind of, oh, I like sci-fi. That was a thing I covered. Has nothing
right.
to do with my sort of sexuality, but
Yeah. Yeah.
just kind of does, there are parts of us we keep back that
Yeah.
do still prevent us from showing up authentically. And who knows, when you reveal something about yourself, like I love Star Wars or Star Trek, you might find someone else who's like, oh, me too, I love it too. And then suddenly you're building a connection with that person
I
at
uh,
work,
I
right?
have a good friend who's my age. He's a surgeon, and he is absolutely the biggest geek for that sort of thing. And I love sci-fi, but he really loves it. I mean, he knows all the trivia. He knows everything. He has outfits that he wears to Comic-Con. It's a whole nother level, but he owns it. And people I think are really attracted to that because he's not sitting there and thinking about, well, what are people going to think about me because I love Marvel and I know everything about every character and every universe in the multiverse.
Right. And now we kind of snap for them because they're showing up in their authentic
Exactly.
self, right? And
Yeah.
that happens across the workplace in many different facets
Yeah.
of
Absolutely.
identity. There's
Absolutely.
another question that just popped in.
Yeah.
What's the biggest hurdle to true authenticity?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think Megan in the reply there really hit the nail on the head. It's fear. Um, Fear is instinctual to us. Fear is what kept us safe when we were, hunting mammoths, woolly mammoths. Fear was a survival. It's part of natural selection. Um, but sometimes that fear that was healthy at one point can become unhealthy. And I like to think of it in terms of what is that fear costing me? What is it holding back from me? Um, and just going back to the Marvel thing that you were talking about, Ryan. I mean, you have that fear of how people are going to perceive you. Um, but perhaps what bit of joy might that be stealing from you?
Stealing from me. And then what I've found is when I try to build bridges and build connections, you can sometimes build a bridge with someone you share very little in common with, but maybe that's where you could start. And then you find you have more in common than you realize, right? So you start with something trivial like your fandom, but
Yeah,
then you realize that there's more you share in common than you are unalike,
yeah, yeah.
as one
I'll
of my
tell
good
you,
said.
I'll tell you a really interesting thing that I had to do in my last role. In my last role, I had a lot of external customers who had to do, we did golfing, dinners, things like that. And when I'd go golfing with someone, with my counterpart from another company, we'd be in the golf cart and usually it was around hole 3, 4, or 5. They would start asking me questions, well, how long you been at Shell? What do you do? Where'd you go to school? Things like that. And then they'd say something like, how long have you been married? And, I'd answer the question truthfully. And then they say, well, what does your wife do? And at the time I was married and I'd have to say, I don't have a wife. Actually, I have a husband. Um, I will tell you, it was really uncomfortable doing that because I don't know the culture of that company. I had a lot of companies that I did business with from overseas, from China, from Japan, and I don't know how that's going to be accepted. Um, I will say sometimes there is healthy fear. I had to travel to I had to travel to Saudi Arabia in the early 2000s. That was a time when I did not disclose. My boss knew I was gay. But I did not disclose to the people there while I was in Saudi Arabia. That was something that I need to keep to myself for safety, for healthy fear.
Sure, sure.
I think Robin has her hand raised, maybe. I don't know.
Oh no, Robin and I are geeking out over our
Rock
Star
sign.
Trek fandom, making connections in
Yes.
the chat. So if someone wanted to start using your effortless presence model, what's one small shift they could start doing even today?
Yeah. I'd start with a pause. That pause that we talked about. So before I step into a meeting or click on that join meeting link, I just take 10 seconds to breathe and ask myself, who do I want to be in this space? Not what do I need to say or how do I need to show up to impress, but who am I when I'm grounded, honest, and aligned? That question alone will reconnect me with my values and my voice. It's not about performance at that point. It's about authenticity with intention. I'm choosing how I want to show up in alignment with my values. And bringing your full self into that space without apology and without the armor that we put on ourselves, that is the heart of effortless presence.
I like that because you're setting intentions and going into that meeting. We go so fast from meeting to meeting and jump from thing to thing so often it's hard to force ourselves to take that pause.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, you've mentioned being the pressure that LGBTQ plus folks specifically feel, right? So we've talked about covering in general, but let's bring it into the LGBT specifically. When we bring that component of ourselves into the room, what has helped you navigate that the most,
Hmm.
best?
Yeah. I think it was ultimately learning that I didn't have to be polished, extra polished or extra professional. I just need to be myself. And I'll make an admission, I used to hate speaking in front of others. And I stopped to think about why I hated that. And why I hated that was because I was used to trying to control people's perceptions on a one-on-one or small group basis. I could do that. When I was in front of a large group speaking with everyone, um, it was like my circuits were overloaded in my brain. I was thinking, oh my God, how am I going to control the perceptions of 100 people? When I finally just let go of that, that's when I just started to get back into, the center of who I am. Um, you know, I, I I could see that I was more um, than a shell executive. I was a gay man and a human being. Um, and I just sit in that. I just sit in that and go back to my core. Um, I do think too that it's just a realization um, that ultimately there is only one thing that I can control. The only thing I can control are the actions that I take. I can't control what I think. I can't control what anyone else thinks. And I can't control outcomes. I can influence outcomes, but I can't control them. So ultimately, I've got to come back to what are the actions that I'm going to take in this situation?
It also makes me think that we know studies show that diverse workplaces are more innovative. So
Yeah.
the other thing is, if you sit in that power of I'm LGBT or I'm an ally, and my perspective in this room matters too,
Mhm.
right? Like what
Yeah.
I bring to the table is unique from anyone
Yeah.
else because of my world experiences, my various identities, and I bring that into today's room in power, not just, hiding that part of me, but also actually letting it influence. Maybe we're working on a project where my experiences will really actually benefit being shared to the final product, right?
Yeah.
And if I hold that back, am I holding back the company too, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And then is that impacting your performance? And does it become a, self-fulfilling prophecy of I'm not going to do well because I'm gay, because I'm holding back? Or I could even see it on the opposite end of the spectrum that it could really, that could really impact as well. each of us have, just so much capacity of what we can deal with at any time. We only have so much capacity. And if a significant portion of that capacity is being taken up on determining how I want to show up, how I need to show up in the situation, am I saying the right thing? Did I say the wrong thing just now? Oh my God, what are people going to think about me? When my brain is full of that type of talk, it takes away from me being focused on the job at hand and what I need to do and doing it well.
Yeah, I know I was talking to one of our corporate partners that our impact partners that um, they work in high pressure environments where chemicals and other things are actually under pressure. So in those environments, you need to be present and monitoring. And if your head is somewhere way far away and you're not thinking about what you're actually doing, like there could be, consequences
Yeah.
to not being present in that moment, right? We certainly think about that for airline pilots or other folks. Like we want them to be present on the job they're doing,
Yeah,
right?
I do.
But even down to like the person working in retail or the person working at a restaurant, being
Yeah.
present can be important to be in that moment and not forget things or
Yeah.
overlook something because you were too busy worried about should I come out.
Yeah. And I mean that takes me back to the great thing that I went to Rice University and to get certification in from the International Coaching Federation, and one of the things that we learned is that we don't go in with the answers. That's not what coaching is. Coaching, that's consulting.
Mhm.
Coaching is really understanding you as an individual. What is holding you back from doing whatever you want to do? What are the goals that you want to achieve? How are you going to achieve them? And then going back to the one thing that I can control is what actions am I going to take to get me there?
Thank you, Tim. Any last questions for Tim before we wrap up? Stephanie shares, we were having a nice side chat just now about how our team has been so successful because we can all bring our whole selves to work. We don't expend energy masking, so we can spend that energy creating and being productive.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And that is the biggest argument for DEI and inclusion at corporate America. Because
Absolutely.
because by doing that, your employees who are your greatest resource are going to be more productive because they're not spending so much time thinking about how they need to show up.
And that ties us back to the effortless presence model.
Exactly.
Really love it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. Thank you again, Tim, for sharing your insights with us today. Um, I'm going to ask Maureen if she could just drop Tim's contact info one more time in the chat for folks if they would like to connect with Tim after today. And then did my slides come back on screen? All right, good. So in closing, we just want to mention that there are sponsorship opportunities for all kinds of workplace alliance events that we have coming up. So if your company, particularly if you're a consumer-facing brand, if you want to try and get more connection to the chamber, we have lots of opportunities, and that's what I'm here for. If you ever think, we should have a table at that event, like our third Thursday breakfast or some of the other chamber offerings, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm here to support you. And whether it's how many folks you can bring to the puttery or what events are coming up next, do feel free to reach out to me. I am your resource through the Greater Houston LGBTQ plus Chamber of Commerce. So feel free to reach out to me. And with that, we will thank everyone for making their taking the time today to join us for this conversation. If you enjoyed it, maybe check out our YouTube in a couple days and share it with other folks in your company. Maybe they could benefit as well. So thank you all and have a great day.